dipstick, 17 bucks,
563
T56 Magum F, dipstick tube, $21, $96.
Used T56, which now that price is way high. If you clicked on this video, you're probably considering LS swapping your car. And I can't blame you, it's one of the most popular engine swaps in the United States, if not the whole world, and that's for good reason. Now in this video, I'm gonna go over what I recently LS1 swapped, and that's my 1994 BMW 325 IS. Got a lot of requests for a cost breakdown of this car, so I'll happily go over that with you guys. And for new viewers out there, hopefully you get some insight too if you're considering LS swapping really anything. And I'm gonna break this video down. We're gonna have engine costs, transmission cost, drive shaft cost, and then miscellaneous stuff. At the end, we'll add that all together and see what the total is. If you guys have any guesses, comment below, I'm curious. I have to look at my accounts here to see exactly all the things that I bought. That's why I have my phone. And that's just Amazon. I still have an eBay list to go through as well, and some other manufacturers. So we'll start with the first thing, the easiest thing, the most important thing in an LS swap, the LS engine. So this is an LS1 5.7, got it from a buddy of mine. He rebuilt the entire engine, oil pan to intake. But it has all new bearings, higher compression, diamond pistons, ported truck heads, an aftermarket comp cam, stock valve train, at least for now. It did have a Y-end intake manifold on it. I swapped in the fast LSXR 102 intake manifold recently. Some good parts on it, and it should be making some good power, which I will be hitting the dyno soon. So that engine cost me 1,400 bucks. Now that was obviously a very great deal, just because he's a friend of mine. I've known him for a while. He's really into E36s and all sorts of BMWs. Now, can you get a 5.7 LS1 stock for about that price? Yeah, probably. You just gotta look hard enough, check junkyards and whatnot. And to sweeten the deal even more, that also included an aftermarket clutch and flywheel setup. So that was free for me, but for you guys, obviously, that won't be. Things that I had to additionally add to the engine. Had to. Not optional, these are things I had to have for this swap. Likely you will too. GM OEM dipstick, 17 bucks. 302-2 oil pan kit, $263. Dipstick tube, $21. I just got a cheap eBay 102 millimeter throttle body, and that came with a TPS sensor, the IAC sensor as well. That was $96. Accessories on the engine. I got an LS7 water pump, $110. For the water pump, I needed all the bolts because it doesn't come with them. It was another $13. Then I bought a bunch of ICT billet stuff to mount all the accessories. So I got the alternator power and power steering pump brackets and pulleys and whatnot, $170. An alternator, $95. I got the belt to go with it, that was another $12. Belt tensioner, $22. Power steering pump, $122. Power steering pump pulley, $33. The starter, $75. The spark plug wire for $25. ICT billet coil brackets to mount all the coils, $40. I needed an oil pressure sender, $10. Big ticket item for this swap, headers. Now I went with the CX Racing headers. They actually seem like a pretty good quality kit. $591. Aluminum oil cap on the valve cover, $15. Throttle cable to work with the stock BMW pedal drive-by cable setup. It's a low car unit, $60. And then the bracket to hold that from low car is another $57. With steam ports on an LS, you have a ton of different options. I ended up going with basically sort of a DIY kit that I got off of eBay, $120. Now the actual intake that goes to your filter off the engine, you can run that 100 different ways. I just bought a 4-inch U bend and just cut it exactly how I wanted it. There's a slight turn down, $32. You need a filter, I got a Spectre 4-inch, $37. Totally unnecessary, don't need it, but if you're curious, with the 102 millimeter fast intake manifold, that was $1,064. And to go along with that, I got the fast fuel rail kit as well, and that was another $205. This engine did come with fuel injectors, however, I ended up replacing them with bigger ones when I swapped over to the 102 intake manifold. So I got some Siemens, however you say it, Deca 60-pound injectors, $400. In my setup for the fuel system, I run the Corvette fuel filter, which is the fuel filter and regulator all in one, super easy, nice, simple setup, $55. Now on top of that, I had to add the fittings to come off of said filter. So that was $9 for one of those fittings, and the other fitting was $11. So the output to the engine, I got an AN fitting, so that was $14. Continuing on with the fuel system, based on the power that this engine is making, probably about 450-ish, I could get away with the stock E36 fuel pump. The aftermarket fuel pump I had in there had somehow died as the car sat for many years when it was turboed. So I got a new Works fuel pump. I got a 255, $93. Now the thing that runs this whole setup, and I highly suggest you guys do the same, I got the Holley Terminator X. Excellent, excellent system. Plug and play, basically. You run a few wires depending on how you want to have your setup. So far I've just been running on the self-tune. Really does run fantastic. So that was $1,000. I would go with the Holley Terminator. I want to be able to run E85. So I got a flex fuel sensor, $58. And then I got the power tap, which is for the alternator wiring / flex fuel wiring. I got it as a kit. $65. You will need that to make your alternator work. The Holley Terminator doesn't come with your sensors. You need those already. So some of the various ones that I got a coolant temp sensor, that's $12, and an intake air temperature sensor, that's another $13. Holley also doesn't come with your coil pack harness, it's another $61. You can use your stock cluster most likely in whatever vehicle you have with the Holley Terminator setup. That wasn't my long-term goal. My long-term goal was to have a digital dash. So I ended up getting exactly that, the Holley digital dash. And to go along with that, I got the Holley GPS sender. That way I have 100% accurate speed, basically no matter what. So the GPS sensor was $72, and the Holley digital dash itself, touchscreen and everything, totally worth it in my opinion. Plug and play with the Terminator setup, $773. For mounting the engine and transmission, I went with Pennsylvania Performance motor and transmission mounts. Those were $475. So with that, that covers the engine. So the total engine cost for my particular swap was $7,816. Now that's including the fast intake manifold, the fast fuel rails, the E85 sensor, and some other things. So you subtract those things that aren't necessary, and I had the engine running without earlier, you get $5,244. Now working our way back, this is where I made a big mistake and the biggest problem with this whole swap. I bought a used T56. Don't do that. T56s are shooting up in price, and it seems like they won't stop. So you might as well just buy a new one. But anyway, this was a couple years ago. I bought a used T56 off a guy. He claimed it was rebuilt. Well, I put it in the car. Couldn't really shift any gears. So I paid $1,200 for this used T56, which now that price is way higher. Learn from me, don't buy a used T56. So that's $1,200 down the drain. So I ended up buying a brand new T56 Magnum F. Comes with a warranty, came with a price too, $3,300. Now I did sell my used transmission. I think I got $400 for it. So all in all, I paid basically $4,100 for a T56 Magnum. Clutch pressure plate bolt set, $13. Transmission flywheel bolts, $18. Bell housing to transmission bolt set, $12. Did have to buy a shift knob for the T56 Mag. Just got a regular Jegs black one, $27. I got the backup switch and the wiring for that. Still haven't wired that up yet. I do need to do that. The wire was $10 and the backup sensor was another $15. And then I did the speed sensor delete in the transmission because I don't need that. That was from ICT, $25. I also had to swap out the master cylinder, different OEM BMW one, $52. I had to get some miscellaneous brake hose as I had to move the ABS pump just a hair over and I wanted to replace those ugly blue ones, $23. I also went with the MGW short shifter for the T56 and then I swapped it over to the T56 Mag. That was $214, but totally worth it. The total cost for the transmission was $4,509 and that's not including the drive shaft. And that was with a free clutch. Off the transmission is the drive shaft. Now I got one used, it wasn't the right length for me. It didn't have the right yoke on it. Now the problem was with the drive shaft, I bought a Sonnax yoke, which worked with the original T56, that was $170. However, that did not work with the T56 Mag. So then I had to swap that out and buy another one, though that was another $150. In addition, with the drive shaft, once I got the correct yoke 2 times, I needed to get it shortened, and when you get it shortened, you have to get it balanced. So that was another $400. So I paid $150 for the drive shaft, plus multiple yokes, about $300 there. So now we're at $450 plus another $400 for balancing and shortening. There are companies that make drive shafts for this swap. Should have just bought one of them, but you live and you learn. In my particular case for the steering shaft, it's kind of wonky with an E36. You have to fit it through the headers. You can't use the OEM one. I decided to make my own solid one out of 2 E36 shafts for 35 bucks a piece. Now my fan setup was pretty easy. I actually run mine off the Holley, but I had to get a separate relay harness to use that's ground activated from the Holley, so that's another $37. Now generally I have the OEM cooling system in this car. Now, this is a Miscellanous radiator. I did buy their expansion tank and mounted it in a different location that works better with the LS swap. So that expansion tank, $145. There are a ton of ways to set up your heater hoses. I still wanted heat in this car. It is a street-driven car. I can't even really explain how many heater hoses I got because they're all different sizes. Some you need 90, some you need this and that. You got to connect them together with all sorts of different things. So I'm just gonna say probably $100 in heater hoses, and then additional connectors like the ICT billet connectors to connect one size hose to a different size, or just connect two together. I ordered a bunch of those. They were about $6 each, so I'd probably say about 30 bucks there. And then to connect the hoses, I did use some traditional stainless steel metal clamps. When it comes to hoses coming together of different sizes or just to make them longer, etc., I went with the Gates Power Grip clamps. It's basically a giant heat shrink. You put it over your connector, you heat it up with a heat gun, it shrinks, and it is a permanent connection, and it just looks a lot cleaner. I used a good bit of those, approximately $50 worth. Again, not necessary, you can stick with traditional clamps, but I think this looks a little cleaner. Exhaust, I bought that used. It was from another swap, and it does fit. It's a cheaply made exhaust, but it does fit. Has an X pipe. Other than that, it's 100% straight through. So that was another $150. However, I will be changing that out. I want to get a custom stainless steel exhaust built all the way back with a V-band swappable muffler in and out, because sometimes I probably want it to be a little quieter. It is pretty loud, though it does sound good. I ran a bunch of AN stuff in here for the fuel system and also for the steam ports, probably about $300 in AN fittings and lines, because there are multiple sizes. Included in this final group is just some miscellaneous parts, which will be things like wiring, wire ends, hose clamps, fluids, vacuum lines, paint, nuts, bolts, washers, grommets, gaskets, gasket maker, all sorts of things like that. I'm just gonna throw out a number of 500 bucks. That brings our total cost to get this engine in this car, $14,577. Yikes. That's a lot higher than I was expecting. I've been estimating with guys that it was probably around like the $10,000 mark, but I was considerably off by almost 50%. Still worth it. Now that's just my particular setup. It wasn't a budget build, and it wasn't a spend all the money you can possibly spend build. It was a get good parts for good prices build. That was the goal. You can do it much cheaper, and one of the ways to do that, and what I would recommend if you're gonna swap something, buy a wrecked or totaled F-body car. When you do that, you have the engine, the clutch, the transmission, you have all the accessories on the engine, and you're pretty much good to go. You'll need motor tranny mounts, drive shaft, exhaust, etc. But that's gonna save you a huge chunk of change. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.